This episode is made possible by Roundel. You can partner with Roundel and get in front of the over 165 million folks who look to Target for joy and inspiration. Together with you, Roundel design curated media solutions that are a seamless extension of the Target experience, all backed by unrivaled first-party data and measurement. Head to roundel.com today.
The ad-supported experience or the ad-supported content on streaming is just much broader than it was a few years ago when like way less than half of time spent streaming was ad-supported a few years ago. You know, that was like almost a niche.
Hey gang, it's Thursday, June 20th. Ross and listeners, welcome to the Behind the Numbers Daily, an eMarketer podcast made possible by Roundel. I'm Marcus, who's joined today by one of our senior analysts who covers everything digital advertising and media based above New York City. It's Ross Benish.
Keep it rolling, baby.
Good intro. Today we're talking about CTV, but we start with the facts of the day. Ross, I've got two for you here. The longest, they're both sellout streaks. So tickets, selling out and tickets, streaks. One is by total games. The other is by overall time. So do you know the longest sellout streak by a sports team in terms of total games?
Well, it's probably Husker football, right?
That is by time. Yes.
Oh.
The longest sellout streak by time, Nebraska Cornhuskers have the longest running sellout streak. Started November 3rd, 1962 and is still going today. That means they've sold out the 85,000 person Memorial Stadium. Does that sound right, Ross?
Yeah, it's the capacity's changed a lot over the years. It was a little higher than that.
Course,
now it's shrinking again. Yep.
Okay. But they've sold that stadium out for over 60 years and nearly 400 games. So that's the longest streak by time. The longest streak by games, because...
Is this worldwide?
This is US.
Gosh.
US sports. But football, there's not that many games per year, which is why that struggles to have the record.
So baseball would have the games.
Baseball.
I don't think anyone has the current streak going, but the Yankees probably had a long streak for years.
This one ended, this one was from May 15th, 2003 to April 10th, 2013. So a 10-year span.
Was it the Yankees?
No, they're rivals.
The Red Sox. Yeah, a little smaller stadium, but they were good during that period.
Red Sox, hold the record for the largest number of consecutively sold out home games at a US sports stadium at Fenway Park. It was for 794 regular season games, or 820 if you include the playoffs. And the reason that's significant is because the Huskers have not always been good, but they continue to sell out, Ross, so it's pretty impressive.
There's nothing else going on.
Like the Knicks of college. Somewhat fair. Anyway, today's real topic. Just how far have the TV/CTV scales tipped? In today's episode, first in the lead, we'll cover CTV and some TV things. No other news today. None, I tell you. All right, let's do it, Ross. We're checking in on the linear and CTV race. Linear being how we used to watch TV, CTV being how we now watch TV. Let's start, Ross, by looking at how many people there are watching both.
Well, this year is the first year that CTV is actually going to have more people, but they're basically even at this point. Over 230 million viewers for each of them. And I just want to mention they're not mutually exclusive. A lot of people... because if you add those up, you're going to get a sum that's greater than the U.S. population. A lot of people watch both.
Right. But that's quite the milestone, isn't it? A quiet milestone, it seems.
Yeah, it's a quiet milestone. But it's been building up for a long time. If you're a young person, it feels like, didn't that already happen a few years ago?
That's true. Maybe that's why it's not made the kind of seismic impact that you would expect something like this to make, is because it has been slow but steady growth, overtaking linear viewers by CTV ones. Because in 2021, the gap was 30 million in favor of linear TV people. Today, it's a dead heat, as Ross mentioned. Next year, CTV will be ahead by 10 million, but as he also mentioned, you can be both. It's just CTV has pulled slightly ahead in terms of how many people are watching that versus linear. How about time, Ross? How much time are viewers spending with each?
Well, if you look at just at the viewers, people who are actually watching and not the whole population, with television, it's like 4 hours per day. And with CTV, it's about 3 hours per day. So CTV is generally about an hour per day less time spent per person.
It's still shocking disparities, Ross, by generation as well. This is probably the biggest generational gap I think you can find across all the numbers we cover. Gen X and baby boomers watch about 5.5 hours a day on average. Millennials and Gen Z, it's just 2. I mean, these are like worlds apart in terms of viewership.
Yeah, and they're only going to continue to diverge. So that older audience is what's propped up TV for a long time. And, they probably got another 5, maybe 10 years of doing that more before the young crowd is the majority. And then those numbers are really going to decline dramatically.
Yeah. Those numbers are pretty resilient. I mean, if you go back a couple of years, if you look at like 2021 to 2025, we expect baby boomers to lose about a couple of minutes in TV time, Gen X to lose no minutes over that stretch, actually gain 1 or 2 over that 4-year stretch. Millennials will lose about 7, and it's Gen Z, that's where the numbers drops by about 15 minutes over that time. But still, 15 minutes over those 4 or 5 years is not very much at all when it comes to watching linear TV, that is. And then obviously CTV gaining in comparison to that. One of the promises, Ross, of CTV was less ads, and it seems like that's come true thus far, at least. Daniel Konstantinovich, though, who writes for our marketing and advertising briefing, says that ad loads on CTVs are likely to increase. Do you agree? And if so, by how much?
I do agree. And it wouldn't be surprising if most of these services get closer to 10 minutes per hour. A lot of them have already increased.
That's up from, 4 or 5 currently?
Well, it depends on what service you're looking at.
Roughly.
I mean, the ones that have like probably the smoothest ad experience, mostly because they have the least ads, are Peacock, Netflix, and Max. Those are all only a few minutes of ads per hour. If you're something like Hulu, you're probably already at like 7.
Okay.
And it's only going to edge upward. So I expect them all to go up. YouTube's already got something probably like 10. It's tough to measure it out though, because the ad load differs based on what you're watching, and some stuff is skippable, some is not. Some are really long ads. Are you going to sit through all that? So it kind of depends on how much you're paying attention on whether you're going to skip through the ads, but there's already heavy ad loads. So on the free services too. I mean, Pluto TV, I would not be surprised if that's almost 10 minutes of ads per hour.
So 10 per hour, I mean, it's higher than it once was.
It's not going to happen like next month. I just think that's where it's going to go.
Right. But then can it continue to go up? Because this is down from the 20 to 22 minutes that we've been used to per hour with linear.
Well, linear, I mean, on some programming, it's 20 to 22.
Right.
I think the median is probably closer to like 15.
Oh, okay.
Still high. Still certainly high. I wouldn't see it going up to linear levels because there's a lot of services you could use instead if the ad load. I think those ad loads are viewed as like, I wouldn't say unbearable, but like annoying.
Overwhelming?
Overwhelming for a lot of people now, especially for streaming viewers. A lot of them have been habituated to having low ad loads to no ad loads, thanks to Netflix. A lot of viewers are still going to have no ads at all. They're going to pay extra to not have that, but I don't see it going much over 10.
Okay. Interesting.
If 10 would be that's still a big growth for most of them.
Yeah.
But I could absolutely be wrong. Maybe in 15 years there'll be a half hour of ads. That's all you see.
Hopefully. Madison and Walross think though that the combined ad inventory across CTV and linear will shrink by nearly 7% annually from 2023 to 2027. What do you make of the combined ad inventory across both? Are there just going to be less slots for advertisers, even if they cost more?
Yeah, there will be less slots. I think the analysis is pretty decent. It just makes sense when there's lighter ad loads in streaming and more viewers are ad free. If you transition from linear to streaming, you're not going to get the same ad output, but that's kind of projecting based off of where ad loads are now. 4 years, the ad loads will probably be a little higher in streaming, but you're still going to see erosion, just maybe not 25% over 4 years.
Right. How do the linear TV ad dollars stack up against the CTV ones?
Well, linear TV is still 2/3 of the total spending. So, linear is still like around 60 billion, just under that. CTV is inching up toward 30 billion, but If you look at the whole time frame of when we've done this forecast, we started it in 2019, and that year we thought CTV was 7 billion and linear was 70. It was like 1/10
Wow.
of the total. By 2028, 10 years later, we're projecting them to be basically dead even. They're both going to be like in the 40s, maybe 45 billion a piece, something like that. So it took 5 years to go from 1/10 of total spending being CTV to 1/3. That's where we are now. I think in another 5 years, it'll go from 1/3 to 1/2.
Wow. So traditional, it's surprising to, I mean, considering that, the number of people watching both is on par, that traditional still holds such a convincing lead over CTV when it comes to the advertising money. Obviously, the ad dollars take a while to catch up with the viewers. That's always been the case. But to think that CTV has half the number of dollars as traditional TVs does is shocking. This tipping point that you're talking about that we're approaching in 2028, advertisers spending the same amount of money with linear TV as they do on connected TVs at 45 billion, a significant milestone indeed.
But just to walk through some of those numbers we already talked through,
Yeah.
the reason linear has more is there's an hour more per day per viewer in time spent
Right.
with linear,
Right.
and the ad loads are higher. So
Right.
CTV ad prices are higher, price per ad. But if you have an hour more viewing per day and higher ad loads, even if the number of viewers is even, you're just going to have a lot more money funneled toward linear, even though
Yeah.
it's a declining asset.
What's interesting as well, Ross, is what linear TV is losing, CTV is making up. And if you look at all of TV, so CTV plus linear, I think Converged TV is one of the names that we call it. Converged TV is a near $90 billion market today and will be a near $90 billion market in 4 years. The makeup of those dollars just shifting from linear to CTV. Surprised that those dollars are just kind of, I mean, maybe not moving directly from one to the other. Maybe they're finding other places and then finding their way back to CTV. But I feel like there was a bit of a fear that CTV wouldn't be able to make up the shortfall for linear.
Well, everyone's added an ad tier except for Apple, and Apple's not really, it's a nice service, but it's not like it's the largest in terms of viewership. So
That's what's
there
driving
there
this.
was that fear, but that was before Max, formerly HBO, Disney Plus, Netflix, all got into advertising, and then all these streaming services, including those and others, have
Now Amazon.
paid a lot of money to have live sports. So the ad-supported experience or the ad-supported content on streaming is just much broader than it was a few years ago, when like way less than half of time spent streaming was ad-supported a few years ago. You know, it was almost a niche. It was popular with certain services, but not within the whole industry.
With the CTV ad spending growth, I'm curious as to know why. So CTV ad spending growth is kind of facing a step change downwards from here on out. So if you look at the last couple of years, growth has been kind of 19% almost every year. 2022, 2023, 2024, it's been about 19%. From next year onwards, it's closer to the kind of 10 to 13% range. What's happening here?
Well, we would have lowered that growth sooner if Amazon didn't launch ads into Prime Video. So we were expecting the growth rate to decline. And that just, I mean, it's a maturing space. It's a lot harder to grow double digits from a huge base, even if it means more total dollars. You know, when CTV was only $7 billion in spending, it was a lot easier to grow over 25% than when it's $25 billion in US spending. So the growth rate was going to slow down at some point, even if it was significantly above inflation still. Really, this year and next year, the rates got bumped, especially this year. They got bumped up in the last forecast update because Amazon injected a few $1 billion into this field by forcing everyone into ads.
Okay. So
There's not a whole lot of those moves that you can make.
Right. Right. So Amazon and then just the law of large numbers at play. For the final question, Ross, let's zoom in a bit on the CTV ad space. What jumps out to you when you look at how the CTV ad dollars are shared across the various streaming platforms?
Well, in 2020, you had 3 services in the US that would crack $1 billion in CTV ad spend: Hulu, Roku, YouTube. And everyone else was fairly small. Now you have 5 services that are going to exceed $1 billion this year, and really close to having 7 or 8 services that's going to have $1 billion in spend. So there's a lot more places that have large ad-supported viewership than there was just a few years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great take. Mine was more looking at the folks at the top, because you're right, the market got bigger. There are now a lot more players and all making a significant amount of money. But the shuffle at the top's interesting. This year, the ranking of players making the most CTV ad dollars goes Hulu, number 1, YouTube, number 2, Amazon, number 3. Hulu,
I just want to point
YouTube.
out that that's
Please.
by net, though. YouTube is really much larger than it.
Right,
Hulu.
True.
If you look at all the money if we like from an advertiser perspective, just how much money is going to go into YouTube, we're just looking at what Google takes home in that data. But half the money is going to the creators and stuff, and the advertiser doesn't necessarily know what that breakdown looks like when they're putting the money forward. So YouTube has way bigger scale than Hulu.
That's true. I mean, what's interesting though here is that next year Amazon goes from 3rd to 1st. Hulu from 1st to 3rd, YouTube in this scenario stays the same. So Amazon's going to leapfrog Hulu and YouTube. And in 2026, it'll be the same ranking. Amazon up top, just with slightly bigger gaps for those three. Roku hanging out in a more distant 4th place.
Amazon has a lot of ways to sell streaming advertising. The Prime Video part is just one facet. You know, they have the operating system with Fire TV. We include Twitch stuff on there if it's at least shown on a television screen. Freevee still exists. We'll see if it just gets folded into Prime Video, but there's a lot going on with Amazon.
Yeah. All right, folks, that's all we've got time for today's episode. Ross, thank you so much for hanging out today, fella.
Thanks, Marcus.
Yes, indeed. Thank you to Victoria, who edits the show, Stuart, who runs the team, and Sophie, who does our social media. And thanks to everyone for listening in. We hope to see you tomorrow for the Behind the Numbers Weekly Listen, as an eMarketer video podcast made possible by Roundel. You can come hang out with us on YouTube for that if you want to see what we look like. And you can also follow along to the data we are discussing as we show the charts and the graphics of the numbers.